in listen-only mode.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, March 24th, 21. May we please have roll call?
Chair Clark,
Here.
Vice Chair McGill,
Here.
Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Feck,
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton,
Here.
Commissioner Longstreet,
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda anyone would like to make? Okay. Written communications.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I believe all of the communications you received are related to the last item on your agenda, item number 6.
Did everyone get those?
Oh, excuse me, and there are communications you received related to street tree items as well.
Correct. Okay. That brings us to public comment. Members of the public wishing to speak on matters not listed on the agenda can speak now. There's instructions on how to do so on the screen. Ms. Navarez, do you see anybody here raising or lowering their hand?
Chair Clark, I see one hand raised, but I believe it may be on an item, an agenda item. So let me check. Ms. Valente, I believe you are wanting to speak regarding Ortega Park. Is that correct? You can go ahead and speak.
That's right. I just wanted to make sure so we didn't lose our opportunity.
Right. So once that item, when that item is under discussion, you can go ahead and raise your hand again. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other hands raised?
Chair Clark, no further hands raised.
Okay, thank you. We do not have a youth council report this afternoon, so I'll move to our commissioner committee assignment reports. I'll start with Commissioner Feck.
There was a Creeks budget subcommittee on March 10th, but I was unable to attend.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Yes. I went to the youth council meeting in March. They're working on a variety of safe social distancing projects around Easter activities and various other activities.
Thank you, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. Commissioner Perry. Unmute yourself.
There we go. Now I am unmuted. There was a meeting of the Arts and Crafts Festival, or Arts and Crafts, Sunday Arts and Crafts Show, and they are making great strides to figure out a way to reinvent their event and integrate crafts into the art sections. I thought it was a real positive session. So they're moving forward in a good light, and let's hope for the best results.
That's great news. Thank you. Commissioner Longstreet.
I did not attend the Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting. I was unable to. I did attend the murals workshop, and we will be discussing Ortega Park later.
Thank you. Vice Chair McGill.
There was not a Park Foundation meeting this month. I also attended the Ortega Park Murals workshop, and we'll have questions and comments when we agenda item, excuse me.
Okay, thank you. I attended the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, and we'll be discussing everything that we discussed in that meeting when we get to those agenda items. So I have nothing really to report because we'll be talking about all of that. And I think I hit everyone. Yeah, it's really hard when you're not in person to make sure you don't miss someone. So that brings us to commission and staff communications. Do we have anything on that?
Chair, clerk, and commissioners, only that ended up speaking in the community workshop and then place this on the agenda for discussion.
Thank you. Summary of council actions. Actually, there's nothing listed under ceremonial items, so I take it that means that we do not have any ceremonial items today. Okay.
Commissioners, that's correct for the month of March. However, we've got some milestones coming up for April, so stay tuned.
Okay, great. Thanks. Summary of council actions. Did everybody have a chance to read them? And if you have questions, please ask them now. Okay. Moving forward, minutes. We all have them. We've all read them.
I would move acceptance of the minutes from February 24th.
I will second.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So moved. That gets us to street tree advisory committee items.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. Next slide, please. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove 2 Mexican fan palms located within the front setback at 1126 Harbor Hills Drive. There were multiple reasons listed on the applicant's application for removal. The property is going through pretty extensive redevelopment, and that includes redevelopment of the landscape. The applicant, the landscape architect, stated that they do not feel the palms fit within the new intended design, which involves a lot of native landscaping as well as canopy trees being planted around the property. There were concerns with debris, also concerns with fire. This property technically is located within the coastal interior fire zone, and they also listed issues with the palms affecting view shed. The committee reviewed the application, the landscape plan, had discussion regarding the proposed improvements to the landscape plan, as well as the value that the existing palms provided to the property. During discussion, the applicant provided some additional information, and it was also referenced on the applicant's letter that the property and the project itself has gone through single family design board of review and received final approval. During that review, the palms were never shown on the plans. So the proposal to remove the palms was not part of the review. And if it had been, it would have been routed back to Street Tree Advisory Committee and Parks and Recreation Commission review prior to obtaining the approval. There is a retaining wall proposed within the footprint of where these Mexican fan palms exist. The applicant provided some really good detailed information regarding the retaining wall, and while it's being referenced as a retaining wall, it doesn't really provide like a structural component. So its purpose is primarily decorative and doesn't really, it's not really doing a lot of like soil retention. So it's not really integral to the slope as other retaining walls may be. So the committee reviewed that information, again, had some additional questions for the applicant regarding the feasibility of incorporating these palms into the existing landscape plan and how that might affect the wall. The applicant did express that obviously that was not what they were hoping to accomplish with the request to remove them. But if the commission did feel that the retention of the palms was necessary, that the wall could be modified and the palms could be retained as part of the project. And we've discussed this previously with situations where single family design board has reviewed a project and there's been final approval for a project, and then there's a tree-related issue such as this where we have trees within the setback that was not part of the review, there is a mechanism in place for that. So if the commission does feel that there are no findings that support the removal of these 2 Mexican fan palms, what would happen is there would be an administrative review at the single family design board's staff level, where the palms would be reflected on the landscape plans, and then the palms would be incorporated into the approved final landscape plans for the property. So with all of that information, the committee reviewed it. Their comments were the palms added considerable value to not just the property, but the neighborhood. They really could not identify a finding to support the removal and made a motion to deny the request for the removal of the 2 Mexican fan palms at 1126 Harbor Hills Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Who would like to start with questions? Vice Chair McGill?
Yeah, I don't need to go first, but I have a quick question. The application references one of the reasons being that the trees are at the end of their lifespan. Can you talk to that a little bit? I mean, what is the lifespan? How much longer are these trees likely to live? I mean, the obvious questions.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that is a great question, and that was listed on the application. There was some discussion at the committee level in regards to that note about the palms being near their end of lifespan. The general consensus was that the palms have probably a considerable amount of longevity left in terms of their lifespan. The Mexican fan palm can live for well over 100 years. It's something that you rarely see sort of like senescing and ending, its lifespan. So I think that without lots of detailed information in regards to the specific age of them, it's pretty safe to say that they have a pretty considerable amount of like longevity left technically.
Thanks.
Commissioner Longstreet?
I appreciate that we got the landscape plan, but I'll tell you, I can't read anything on it. It looks like there's trees going in. What, do we have any idea? All the application says is native trees.
It says native, in teeny letters, it says native oaks.
Yes, but how many native oaks? I can't read the,
Oh, yeah.
what do we have? What do we have happening in terms of replacement?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, one of the supplemental letters that was sent from the applicant did outline the species. There will be 4 15-gallon native oaks planted, 3 Arbutus marina, 6 specimen olives, and roughly 4 to 5 citrus trees as part of the full landscape plan. Now, all of those don't technically occur within the front setback. Some of them do, but those were the sort of canopy trees listed, as well as a sort of a myriad of additional landscaping throughout the property.
Thank you.
Would retention of these 2 Mexican fan palms exclude the ability to replant with all the species that they indicated they were going to plant?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the proposed landscape plan as presented by the applicant didn't show any trees within the sort of the footprint of where the existing Mexican fan palms are located. I believe the applicant is planning on making some comments, so they can probably provide a little bit more detail, but it didn't appear on the landscape plans that there were any proposed plantings of any large, shade trees or fruit trees within the general area of the Mexican fan palms.
Okay. And then I guess my other question was it an accidental omission of the trees when this went before a single family design review board? Were they just forgotten or?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I believe so. You know, the applicant and the property owner have been very forthcoming, coming back and having this review. These things happen. You know, it's can be very difficult to make sure that during, you know, preliminary surveys and stuff that all vegetation's accounted for on projects of this scale. So I think it was just, you know, it just chalks it up to sometimes these things happen, and sometimes trees are left off, or even sometimes trees are shown on plans, but they're really not kind of specifically called out, and they kind of get lost in the mix, you know, and it's not really identified, even though there may be a little line that shows the, you know, the canopy. So I think they've been, you know, very honest, and they've provided lots of great information to sort of articulate the goals of the request.
I guess from your answer, I don't think I expressed my question in the right way. I don't doubt their integrity at all. My question was, was it just an accident that got left off, or was there lack of information on their part? Did they not know that they had to get approval for trees to be removed? I don't know the landscape architects or anything, so I just want to make sure that everybody knew what's involved, and they don't have to suffer because they didn't have adequate knowledge in their hands about rules and regulations of tree removals.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I believe the applicant, the landscape architect, is well aware of the front setback ordinance.
Okay. If there are no further questions, I would like to ask if there are people from the public who would like to comment on this agenda item.
Chair Clark, yes, we have a Chris Gilliland. Mr. Gilliland, you may unmute yourself. You'll have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nevarez. I'm the landscape architect for this project, and I appreciate you know, your time today, Madam Chair and Commission members, and thank you for your service. I just want to clear a few things up. I've been listening in here, and to answer your question, Madam Chair, the palms, I don't honestly know what happened. They were not on the survey originally, so they weren't on my plans either. And the main focus, you know, during the design of this project was really up around the house. And so it just kind of got left behind. And then regarding Mr. Slack's comment about the retaining wall, it is actually critical that we do have a retaining wall there along the driveway, because if you see from that photo and the photos that I sent, it's an extremely steep hillside. And so we definitely need a retaining wall there, and it would be designed differently if the palms were gone. And also regarding the locations of the new trees, yeah, we're putting in some pretty major, you know, either 48 or 60-inch box arbutus. And when I design a planting plan, you know, it may change on site. And actually once I saw the site a little bit better, because it used to be covered completely in vegetation. Now that it's been cleared, we're noticing that the original location for the arbutus, which was down around the corner a little further, is just not going to work because it's too steep. So if the palms were gone, that is the location where I'd want to put these arbutus. And there's also a lot of existing oak saplings and trees that we're going to be leaving in place. And really, we just want to go with a really native picture here. And right now, those palms, they just dominate the whole entry. And they almost, as you drive up on it, it just looks like 2 telephone poles because they're so tall. So the idea is to nativize that hillside. So that looks like my 2 minutes, and I'll end it there. But there, you know, again, a myriad of reasons for removing. Fire is a big one. And of course, just the sense of entry into the property.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Gill.
Thank
Thank you. We have comments.
I would say it makes a difference to me having a setback tree replaced, and having it replaced with a canopy tree for palms makes a difference to me. I would not want to see those palms come out until all the work was underway, and you know, they were pretty far down the road and they needed to, you know, for the construction and that stuff. So it does change the tenor of it to have it replaced for me.
Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Please, Commissioner Perry.
Looking at the replacement plan of going with, not exclusively, but primarily natives, the fan palms are not a complementary fit there. And if you were to wait for planting, dropping the branches, more importantly, dropping the trunk is going to cause damage to anything that's been planted below their drip line. It seems like a reasonable request to me. I'm surprised it was unanimously opposed, because again, the plan is to change the attitude of the property and make it more of a native fruit-bearing trees, olives, oak trees, and the fan palms just are not a complementary fit.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. Mr. Slack, I didn't bring my notes from the meeting, and one thing I can't remember is how much the timing of this affected the Street Tree Advisory Committee's decision. The fact that it came to us already approved by the Single Family Design Review Board, did that impact your discussion? The question is, do you think they would have made a different decision had this item come to us first, or come to stack first? I'm trying to remember that conversation, and it's eluding me.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think that based on the comments from the committee, that the decision would have been the same. They were, Chris provided lots of really good information in regards to the retaining wall and the palms in relation to the retaining wall and their location being, next to one another within the footprint. And they were, the committee, I think, felt that they were being pretty objective about the review of the trees. So I don't think that it would have changed the recommendation from the committee at all, whether it had been seen prior to approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slack. Does anybody else have any more comments? Okay. We could entertain a motion. Okay, we need to have some more discussion. Are people conflicted about this item?
I'm a little conflicted. So I guess can I ask not just a couple quick questions? In terms of the canopies, how long is it going to take for some of these trees to have a meaningful impact? And then what's the canopy of the arbutus in particular? What does that look like in terms of height, canopy width, things like that?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, were you asking about the mature size of the Arbutus marina?
I think that the mature size of the Arbutus marina, and then how long is it going to take the plantings of this size and scale to get meaningful size?
Yeah, I think that, the indication of using, 36 to 48 inch box and 48 inch to 60 inch box trees will have a pretty significant impact, almost immediately after installation, just because those are pretty significant size trees that they're putting in terms of box size. And then the Arbutus marina, it can, the largest one known of in the state of California is actually on San Marcos Growers Grounds out in Goleta, and I think it's 45 feet tall. So it's, it takes a little while. It does grow probably at a moderate rate, but it has lots of potential for being a pretty large canopy tree, as well as the native coast live oaks. You're well aware of, their potential size. And then again, the olive too. I think you would see a pretty significant, impact to the existing landscape. And then, over time, it would be really considerable, the amount of canopy that's being proposed for the property.
I feel like I could make the finding that this would be a benefit to the urban forest. Replacing the palms with I'm not even going to try the name, in a, what could we say, 36 to 48 inch box? Mr. Slack, would that be a reasonable size?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, I think given the information that the applicant provided on the supplemental letter calling out the specific container sizes, if you're comfortable with what's being proposed, it could simply be that the approval could be conditioned on, proposed replacements, as proposed by the applicant.
Okay. Then I would make that motion to approve the removal with the replacements as provided by the applicant, and that this, the finding would be that it would be a benefit to our urban forest.
And
I'll
I'd be
second that.
happy to second that.
I think Vice Chairman Gill seconded it a second before your second. Any discussion?
I actually thought the palms looked kind of cool, so I must be an outlier here, but I certainly understand the urban forest argument.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That brings us to our next agenda item.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a tipu tree located within the front setback at 1302 East John and Ollie. On the application, the applicant listed disruption primarily to hardscape, including driveway, surrounding hardscape around the tree, as well as the walkway on the home. There was also reference to damage to the foundation, even though there was really no clear evidence or in terms of like photographic evidence or a report that truly exhibited that there was technically damage to the foundation. The committee reviewed the application, had discussion about the item. They commented that the tree was in great health, felt that it, or noted that it contributed pretty significantly to that corner. They commented, the street was somewhat barren there of large canopy trees, and that this tree really kind of helped to fill the void. The comments pertaining to the hardscape was that these disruptions could be managed, easily repaired without causing detrimental damage to the tree. There were also some comments from the committee members about looking at an alternative ground cover, moving away from hardscape and looking at something maybe like DG or wood chips around the tree that would reduce the incidence of hardscape disruption in the future. After review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the request for removal of the tipu tree at 1302 East John and Ollie Street.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Questions? Okay, no questions. Do we have anybody from the public to speak on this agenda item?
It's Chair Clark. I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Comments?
I have a question. So on the letter that was submitted, it was talking about kind of the root maintenance and just the worry of if they do the root maintenance, that it potentially puts the tree at risk. But I know that that was kind of a solution, or I guess recommendation for kind of root treatment. Is it true that it would, if you do the root maintenance, that there would be risk to the tree if that was like the solution without cutting it down?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Feck, I believe that most of the hardscape damage that was illustrated in the photographs that the applicant submitted was pretty minimal. So I think that it, and the sidewalk and the driveway actually are pretty far away from the tree. So when you talk about like root pruning, the further away you get, the more reasonable it is. So the committee, had noted that they felt that root pruning could be used, and there is a quite a bit of asphalt sort of within the drip line of the tree, and that could be substituted for like an alternative sort of ground cover that would reduce the need for any type of root pruning within that general area. I think that Tipuana, Tipu trees are also extremely tolerant of root pruning. I think that to manage the disruption that they showed in the photographs, it would be completely reasonable to determine that it wouldn't be detrimental to the tree to make some root pruning cuts. You could even, there's always the opportunity to excavate, do root pruning, and use things like root barrier to prohibit or at least prevent future disruption to hardscapes as well.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a replacement tree proposed?
No.
The letter from Economy Tree, the application says they haven't decided. The letter from Economy Tree says a strawberry tree.
Yeah, it says a strawberry tree and arbutus.
Well, on my site visit, it felt like removal of this tree was to provide parking. And that's parking in a front yard setback, which we do not allow in the city. That whole area is asphalted, and the tree, if it's removed, is going to be a huge detriment to the neighborhood because it is somewhat camouflaging that particularly large utility pole. It softens that neighborhood, but I really felt it was to accommodate front yard setback parking, and that is not a reason to remove a tree.
Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner Longstreet that it seems like a very, very important tree in that spot in the neighborhood. And it was, of course, we have mainly photos to judge the damage by, but it was so it's a bit hard to assess, but it didn't really look like it was causing any significant disruption. I can make a motion if we're. Okay, I would make a motion that we support the street tree recommendation to deny removal of the teakwood tree on 1302 East Yennon Alley.
I'll second.
We have a motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. So moved. Thank you.
Chair
And-
Clark, may I ask who made the second? I didn't get that.
I seconded and then BB seconded it. So we have 2 seconds.
Thank you.
And that brings us, I believe that Vice Chair McGill is going to recuse herself for this next agenda item.
That's correct, and I need to state why and then disappear. So it's because our property is within 500 feet of the property in question.
Thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a Mexican fan palm located within the front setback at 1502 Crestline Drive. On the application, the applicant listed a couple reasons for removal. The applicant felt that the palm's root system was a threat to the adjacent retaining wall, and they also listed maintenance concerns with the need to frequently prune the fan palm itself. The applicant also noted on the application that the palm germinated on its own, which happens all throughout town, in the parkways and front yards everywhere, and they've kind of allowed it to grow and they've taken care of it, but now they're at a point where they just wish to kind of remove it and eliminate it from the landscape. The committee reviewed the application, discussion about the tree. They noted it was in good health, had been well maintained. There was discussion about the retaining wall. as we've discussed in previous meetings, palm tree root system doesn't produce secondary growth. So the roots of the palm never get larger in diameter, so that they don't get bigger in girth or diameter over time. And that allows them to be really tolerant of tight areas. And the arborists on the committee commented that the probability of disruption to this retaining wall, given the distance away that the palm is, that it was extremely low, that there would actually be any real structural damage to the retaining wall over time. After review, the committee made a motion or a recommendation, I'm sorry, to deny the request for the removal of the Mexican fan palm at 1502 Crestline Drive.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Mr. Slack? Okay. Ms. Navarez, is there anybody here from the public to speak on this agenda item?
Chair Clark, I do not see a raised hand, but the applicant is attending, and she did email me, and it was my understanding she wanted to speak. I don't know if she might be having technical difficulties.
Are you able
Ms.
call her?
Bichelle, can you send me a message, or I can try unmuting you and see if that will work? You are self-muted, so if you can unmute yourself, or there we go.
Okay, great.
There she goes. Okay, thank you.
This is a 1/3 acre lot. The palm is fairly close to considerable other landscaping, bushes and small trees. We have many oak trees and lovely trees, lovely landscaping throughout. The committee commented on the quality of our landscaping. And this tree is going to get twice as high as it is now over time. I don't know how old it is. It just sort of seeded in, and it seemed like it really was an opportunity to remove it before it got even larger. And we have a lot of older people walking around the neighborhood. These fronds have a way of getting loose and damaging cars, potentially people. I'm an old lady, 87, and it's just I'm sensitive to those issues as well. I think there are many palms in our neighborhood. I doubt that anyone would miss this one. These are very narrow sidewalks along that street, Bella, as you can see in the picture.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Bichelle Sturks. Comments? I do hear and understand the applicant's concern for, maintenance and falling fronds and people walking by. But like she said, she said there are many palm trees in the neighborhood, and she doubts that anybody would miss that one particular one. But the effects of tree removals are cumulative. And if everybody who had a palm in their setback wanted to remove it because the possibility of falling fronds, then I'm sure the neighborhood would miss that cumulative loss of palm trees. That's where I am. Does anybody else have any comments?
On my site visit, I thought it was actually a nice addition to the yard. It was the only tree of height, and it fit in well. It didn't appear to be damaging the wall at all. It softened the building. It softened the architecture of the building. And so those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Longstreet. All right. There are no other comments. I'd like to make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee in their decision to deny the removal of the Washington Robusta at 1502 Crestline Drive.
I'll second it.
Roger seconded it just before you with fingers.
Okay.
I don't know if fingers count. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I see Roger's hand up. I think that's an aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. So moved. Thank you, Mr. Slack. I think that is the last of our Street Tree Advisory Committee items, and that'll bring us to our director's report.
Chair Clark and commissioners, we have a few things to share with you. Activities that are actually already underway, such as spring break camp, because this is spring break. So our recreation staff are getting their first taste of what summer will bring. We're really pleased that we're offering a number of camp opportunities for kids that have been Zooming for, oh gosh, almost a year, if not a year by now, although there's a little bit of in-class teaching happening. When this report was written, which was a week or so ago, we had 259 registrations for spring break camp and some space available. They filled up pretty quickly, as you can imagine. Everyone's looking for a great opportunity to get outside, and luckily, weather so far has been nice the first few days of this week. We have skate camp, Lego camp, ocean and adventure explorers, and spring breakout camp. There's another camp called CSI camp, and if you've seen that show CSI, yes, it's don't ask me to tell you exactly what it is, but it's an online camp. It's a new camp, and I think we're getting some great ideas and response for that. We did also spend a lot of time, as we always do, in the early part of the calendar year, getting ready for summer and pulling together our summer camp list and getting ready to launch for summer listings, and that will happen April 1st. So you'll start seeing some more information float across your inboxes if you're signed up to receive that information. So we'll start enrolling for summer. It's really hard to believe. I know we all just marked sort of the annual mark of when we had the first stay-at-home order, but we're still here. The sun's shining, it's spring, and so we're really looking forward to the opportunity to provide as much safe outdoor recreation experiences for kids coming into the summertime, and looking forward to being able to really enjoy, perhaps looking toward the future. Similarly, Trails Days have been a mainstay of a number of our years here at Parks and Recreation, working very closely with the Forest Service, the county, but more importantly for a number of the Front Country Trails nonprofit organizations that really do a tremendous amount to support maintenance of Santa Barbara's Front Country Trails. We in turn do our best to support them, and then also host specific days each year. So State Trails Day always occurs in April, on or around when we're planning to do it this year. And so we're planning to work with our partners, Montecito Trails Foundation, Sage Trail Alliance, the Multi-Use Trails Coalition, and the Los Padres Forest Association. It's focused on Cold Spring Trail and brushing, tree limbing, and trimming of vegetation. So key activities that are important in the spring. We've had not a lot of rain, but the rain that we have had has germinated all sorts of vegetation. Some we like, some we're not so happy about. So that'll be a great event. We are managing it as a COVID safe event and requiring registration and making sure that we practice the social distancing and the masking that is still needed, despite the fact that we've turned a bit of a corner. We know we still have more time to go. So I would like to acknowledge, both the recreation staff certainly for everything they've pulled off over the last year. And then when it comes to State Trails Day, Steve Biddle and park staff are very much involved in that. And really, we've been out and about for all this time, and it's really important for us to still do these types of events because it brings us joy and excitement, and we love working with our nonprofit partners. Arbor Day is another activity that happens every April. Santa Barbara just enjoyed its 41st recognition as a Tree City USA. It's a national program that recognizes communities who value their trees. And we always have a number of different activities. We do have a resolution that goes to council. That's sort of the formal part. Gives us the opportunity to talk about trees. We also do tree planting in schools, working in collaboration with Santa Barbara Beautiful. Unfortunately, that is not an activity that we will do this year. It'll be the second year that we won't do that as a result of the pandemic. However, that doesn't mean we won't come back to it next year and hopefully be in place to do that. We are planning to do a number of social media posts, try to come up with some fun activities for kids and families to think about their favorite tree, to go look for the largest tree in Santa Barbara, different things that'll get people out and relating to their environment. We have some very old parks in Santa Barbara like Alameda Plaza. We've got the Moreton Bay Fig Tree, where we have some very majestic specimens of trees. And so it'll be fun, hopefully, for people to get out and about on their own. That concludes my report. There's more things coming up in April, some of which we'll talk about under the Ortega Park item, but also the fact that we're entering, even though we're not having an Earth Day festival, there'll be a virtual one, and the city will be participating in that. And then we have, as I mentioned, summer camp registration is going to kick off pretty soon. And then we're also, and this will lead to probably coordinating with the commission, beginning to think about doing some site visits with you, and hope that you'll be interested in that with the longer days. We talked about that, so that'll be coming forward soon. Thank you.
Thank you. A quick question. How can people watching that want to register for State Trails Day register? Who do they contact? Do they contact Sage or the park department or?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought it was on here. They can directly contact our department. Steve Biddle is the contact, and so his email address is sbiddle@santabarbaraca.gov.
Thanks.
Drew?
Yes, Commissioner Lester Buxton has a question for Ms. Zachary.
Yes, thank you very much for the report. What is the status of the department in getting its employees vaccinated, particularly those who work with the camps?
I wondered that too, whether we were gonna get their camp counselors and such vaccinated.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought you were asking. We're already working on that. So a number of our staff that are already and have been working around people, particularly our aquatic staff, our youth activities staff, all are part of the schedule for and have been getting vaccinated so that we'll be ready to go come summertime and spring break.
Great.
Thank you.
I just did my CDC training for the Goleta Valley Clinic, so I hope to be stabbing some of you soon. I'll be there next Friday.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And that brings us to our Creeks Division. Creeks Restoration Water Quality Improvement Division 20-year report. Very happy to welcome Mr. Benson, whose office I am sitting in right now as he's home.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Cameron Benson, and I'm the Creeks Division Manager. It is my pleasure to be with you today to recognize and celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Creeks Division and to present to you the Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Program 20-year report. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Creeks Division history and then talk a lot about our projects and programs that we've been working on. In the late 1990s, as the result of numerous beach warnings and beach closures, the public and the city council became increasingly concerned about creek and ocean water pollution. So in November of 2000, the city council placed Measure B on the ballot, and that was a 2% hotel bed tax increment to be voted on by the public and then to be used, put into a special fund and used exclusively for creek and ocean water quality improvement, creek restoration, and urban runoff pollution prevention. Measure B was placed on the ballot. It was passed overwhelmingly by the voters of the city of Santa Barbara. And in the beginning of 2001, exactly 20 years ago, the Creek Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Division was established. And our very own Jill Zachary was named the first manager of the Creeks Division. The Creeks Division mission is pretty straightforward, and it came essentially right out of that ballot measure, and that is to improve creek and ocean water quality and restore natural creek systems through stormwater and urban runoff pollution reduction, creek restoration, and community education programs. Next slide, please. So the Creeks Division, generally speaking, has three main program areas. First is water quality, second is creek restoration, and the third is outreach and education related to water quality and creek restoration. Next slide, please. So we do a lot of different things with regard to surface water quality. So I'm gonna go through some of the different categories of programs and projects that we have. First thing we do is a lot of water quality monitoring. So in order to determine what the problem is and what the source of the problem is, we need to know, we need to do the monitoring, collect the data. So we do regular monitoring of water quality. We're out on a weekly basis at certain points throughout the city, grabbing samples and sending them to the lab and collecting data on the current state of water quality. We also do storm monitoring, which, as you can see from the picture on the lower right as you're looking at your screen. The storms in Santa Barbara almost always happen at night, so we have our staff out in the middle of the night collecting samples of stormwater runoff and monitoring the quality of that water. We also do project monitoring for our capital improvement projects. So almost all of the projects we do are intended to improve surface water quality. So when we know we're going to do a project and we're out planning that project, we'll go out and collect samples so we can establish a baseline, and then we can monitor those locations after the project has been implemented or constructed and determine how effective certain projects are. And that helps us guide our capital program as we move forward. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that the Creeks Division puts together reporting for the public so that all of that data is analyzed and available to the public. And we do that in the form of 1-year and 5-year reports, which are available on the Creeks Division's website. And that website is sbcreeks.com. Next slide, please. So over the past 20 years, we've done a lot of sampling. We've collected we've done almost 60,000 chemical and toxicity tests, almost 40,000 microbiological tests. We've performed almost 60,000 field tests, and we have collected over 1 million automated logger data points. Next slide, please. Another thing we do to help improve water quality in the city is we do a number of different things to prevent trash from getting into our storm drains and into our creeks and into the ocean and on the beaches. We have creek and beach cleanups that are regularly scheduled. We target specific hotspots. We have contractors out between 3 and 5 days a week collecting trash. We have many, many volunteers throughout the city. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but they're a very important component of our trash cleanup. And believe it or not, we average over 50 tons per year of trash removal from the creeks and beaches in the city. And that has been consistent over the time that we have, that the Creeks Division has been in existence. And as you can see in the infographic down at the bottom, since 2003, we've removed over 1.7 million pounds of trash and debris from city creeks and beaches. And that is on top of and separate from the city's street sweeping program. Measure B contributes to the city's street sweeping program, and that program cleans and removes almost 4 million pounds of debris from the city streets per year. I want to talk a little bit about a storm drain screen project we did. We can move to the next slide, show you what that looks like. In 2010, the Creeks Division installed storm drain screens on all of the catch basin openings, the storm drain openings throughout the city. There's 1,400 of those. Trash is a named pollutant of concern that is regulated under the Federal Clean Water Act and by our regional water quality control boards. And those screens are really focused on keeping trash from going into those storm drain openings. They're installed throughout the city, and they work in conjunction with the street sweeping program. So as you can see in these photographs, you have our typical types of trash and litter that we see: bottles, cans, paper, chip wrappers and things like that. And instead of falling into that opening, they're held up at the street level in the gutter by the screen, and then the street sweeper goes by, and then all that trash gets picked up before it falls down to the bottom of the catch basin, and then in the next storm is washed out to the beach. This entire program was grant funded. We had originally intended to fund a little bit over, throughout the city each year and do the project over 15 to 20 years. But we were fortunate enough to receive a grant to fund the entire project and installed all of them in 1 year. Next slide, please. The Creeks Division is also actively engaged in water quality research, and we have been able to partner with UCSB and Bren School to do some really cutting edge research on water quality, pollution prevention, and water quality pollution source tracking. We partnered with UCSB and were instrumental in developing DNA-based technology for determining what type of pollution we had in the waters. For example, instead of just testing for something like fecal coliform bacteria, we were able to develop the science with UCSB and others to use DNA-based methods to determine whether that fecal coliform bacteria was coming from seagulls or dogs or from human waste, sewage, which is a much more significant public health threat. We actually developed essentially a manual for the state in terms of writing the book on how to do that source tracking that included some common tools that are used in the wastewater industry, but weren't commonly used for water quality protection, and that's closed circuit television. So we had robots with cameras, and instead our wastewater division at the city uses those all the time to check sewer lines, but we use them inside of storm drain pipes to see where leaks might be coming in, or we might have a cross connection with sewer line coming into a storm drain line. And that was, believe it or not, something that people didn't do before that. We also used dye and smoke testing to look for leaks in those lines. And this was one of the most incredible things of all. We found some sewage sniffing dogs that came to town and were able to check storm drains and indicate when they identified the odor or the scent of human waste in a storm drain pipe. And those dogs in one day helped us to find sewage cross connection from sewer laterals that were getting into storm drain pipes that had been hotspots for us, but that we've been unable to track down and figure out exactly where they're coming from. We had almost all of that work, including the sewage sniffing dogs, was grant funded. And then more recently, we've been working on pesticide research. We're consistently finding pesticide in the runoff coming off the city. And we are now working with UCSB on microplastics research and trying to determine the level and significance of microplastics that are in our stormwater runoff getting into our creeks and into the ocean. Next slide, please. The Creeks Division oversees the city's stormwater management program, which is a requirement under the Clean Water Act that the city have a stormwater management program in place. There are very broad components of that program that involve construction and development, as well as operational best management practices and illicit discharge or pollution prevention enforcement. The city and the Creeks Division have developed a stormwater best management practice guidance manual for development as the city is developed and redeveloped. And that is a tool for people in the development community, designers, property owners to use to help comply with the permit requirements, but also to develop in a more water quality friendly way. The Creeks Division oversaw a stormwater management project called the Upper Las Positas Creek Restoration and Stormwater Management Project that is on the city's municipal golf course. And this was a project that removed a lot of turf and asphalt from Adams School and on the golf course, and replaced it with native plants and these stormwater retention ponds that allow stormwater runoff to be captured from Las Positas Road, from Adams School, and from the golf course itself and from neighborhoods surrounding the golf course. There are two stormwater retention ponds that are now part of the golf course that have the capacity to hold over 4 million gallons of stormwater runoff. And so we've been able to provide stormwater runoff treatment as well as habitat development on the golf course. And then we have done several permeable paver demonstration projects. And I think we can go to the next slide. Many of you will recognize these projects. Several of them are in parks or in parks facilities. The Creeks Division has been very successful at receiving grants for demonstration projects with permeable pavers. We've done those projects. Our first one was completed in 2010 in McKenzie Park, 2011 in McKenzie Park, so 10 years ago. And those are the photos you see on the left and in the center of this slide. We've also done projects in Oak Park and Stevens Park, the West Side Neighborhood Center, and Plaza Veracruz, the sidewalks surrounding Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens, and then finally we actually replaced 2 blocks of City Street down on Quarantina Street in between Santa Barbara Junior High and Santa Barbara High School with the permeable pavers. And these allow stormwater runoff to flow through the street surface, which has the permeable pavers on top, and be captured in these gravel beds below, where the water can be held for a short time and then infiltrate into the soil, where the microbes in the soil are able to naturally treat the pollutants that are in that parking lot runoff. Over the past 20 years, we have removed over 200,000 square feet of impervious asphalt and concrete and replaced them with permeable pavers. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to move on to creek restoration, which is another large program area for us and probably one of the most visible things that the Creeks Division does. There are several different layers to our creek restoration program. We have a number of community stewardship sites around the city, and these are small sites and involve neighborhood and volunteers who help to restore and then provide stewardship over those locations. We have a pretty significant invasive plant removal program, and the Creeks Division has a very robust creek restoration capital project program, and I'll talk a little bit more about those things going forward. Next slide, please. Over the last 20 years, through our creek restoration programs, the Creeks Division has planted over 50,000 native plants and trees throughout the city at our restoration sites. And we have removed approximately 370,000 square feet of invasive plant called Arundo donax from the local creeks and watersheds. And Arundo is not only a water or a habitat issue because it outcompetes native plants, it's also a flood control and fire related issue as well. So as we've removed that Arundo, we've been able to replace that with native riparian trees. And I think in place of the Arundo, I think we've installed over 700 native riparian trees. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little about some specific projects that we've done over the years. Santa Barbara is home to a federally listed endangered steelhead trout. The photo at the top is a photo of Lower Mission Creek, where before we had that really significant drought, we had 8 out of 10 years in a row where we had steelhead trout swimming up from the ocean, up Mission Creek, trying to get up into the upper watershed to spawn. These fish are anywhere from 28 to 34 inches long. I mean, it's just unbelievable to see that kind of fish coming up from the ocean in the city of Santa Barbara. Unfortunately, there were a lot of barriers for the fish passage and trying to get to the upper watershed where there is perennial cold, clear, and clean water for them to lay their eggs. Those barriers included what you see on the bottom right of the slide, which is concrete flood control channel called the Caltrans channels. That was installed when the freeway was put through Santa Barbara. And what happens in those flood control channels is they're designed to move a lot of water very quickly, and they're very good at doing so. Unfortunately, when you spread the water out across that channel, the water is very shallow, making it hard for fish to swim up, and it's moving too quickly for too great of a distance for the fish to swim through. So working with partners from the Flood Control District to California Department of Fish and Wildlife to the National Marine Fisheries Service, we were able to develop a design that created a low flow channel and had pockets built into the side of the channel that would create eddies or resting areas for fish. And so we created conditions that the fish would be able to swim up through during and after rainstorms. The pictures on the lower left are in Oak Park, just downstream in Mission Creek, just downstream of the Talent Road Bridge. And with that project, we were able to remove a barrier that was a little over 2,000 square feet of concrete that was in the bottom of the creek and created an impassable barrier for steelhead trout. And as you can see in the picture, one from the left, we were able to replace that concrete with a series of pools and riffles that would be passable for steelhead as they're passing through. All of these projects were done with significant grant support from the state of California and the federal government as well. Next slide, please. Another one of our restoration projects is the Arroyo Burro Open Space Restoration Project. This is down near Arroyo Burro Beach near the mouth of Arroyo Burro. And the Creeks Division was able to partner with the Trust for Public Lands, as well as Santa Barbara County and state agencies to raise funds to purchase an open space park for the public, and then do a significant restoration project in that park. We completed phase 1 of the restoration project at the Arroyo Burro Open Space, and this summer we will be implementing phase 2 of that project, which will include additional creek restoration. We will be doing restoration on a tributary to Arroyo Burro that comes down from Campanile Hill. And we'll also be adding a pedestrian bridge that will lead to the open space from the new multi-use path that the Public Works Department is currently constructing on Las Positas Road. We expect that project to be completed by the fall of this year. Next slide, please. You all are familiar with the Andre Clark Bird Refuge Restoration Project. I believe we presented that to the commission before. This is a project that is intended to improve water quality at the bird refuge, as well as habitat value for the birds that utilize the bird refuge. The problem at the bird refuge is that we have a very well, it's a large lake, but it's very shallow. So we have, and it doesn't flush the way it would have naturally. There was a weir or a dam installed in the bird refuge in the 1920s. The Parks and Recreation Commission minutes from the early 1930s talk about the odor that comes from the bird refuge. So this has been a problem that's been around almost 100 years now. And so we're trying to address those water quality problems and odor problems through this project. The project will do, there are 5 main components, so I just wanted to bring them up quickly. There is a pre-treatment component to this where we're building essentially a wetland area up by the municipal tennis court that will pre-treat the dry weather flow so we don't have these high nutrient loads getting into the bird refuge in the summertime that cause algal blooms and often lead to the odor events. We will be doing some habitat restoration with native plants around or some of the edges of the bird refuge. And then we're going to be replacing that dam or that weir with a new weir and gate system to allow the bird refuge to flush more frequently and fill up with new fresh water from storms. In addition to that, on the ocean side of Cabrillo, we'll be doing some dune restoration, and we will be permitting what we're calling a berm priming. So we have a sand berm that keeps that water in. So even if the gates are open, the water would not flush out, but we want to lower the top of that berm during storms so that Cabrillo doesn't flow, or flood, excuse me, but it gives the opportunity for the lake to flow out to the ocean and refill with fresh water. Next slide, please. This is just an interesting picture of what we've seen as we've been monitoring the bird refuge very closely over the last decade. And these are 4 different pictures, but spliced together, so you see the full range of what you're looking at the bird refuge. And these are not filtered or modified photos. And the one on the left is not a pink dye that we used for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It is a purple sulfur bacteria that just blooms from time to time in the bird refuge. It's very strange and it looks really odd. The next picture is what the bird refuge normally looks like and would normally look like, I think, if you just had clean water in it. The next picture from from the left with the green color is an algal bloom. Usually we have a blue-green algae, also known as cyanobacteria. And we'll have algal blooms in the water. And it's a lot of nutrients coming into the bird refuge, very shallow, very warm water. And so it's a petri dish for those types of algal blooms. And then the last picture is just showing some of the vegetation on the side. Again, water back to normal again. So we're hoping through our project to improve the water quality there, so we don't see these kinds of changes and harmful algal blooms in the bird refuge. Next slide, please. The third category of our program areas for the Creeks Division is our community outreach and education. And the reason this is so important to us is in Santa Barbara, like most cities in the country, our biggest water pollution problem is urban runoff pollution. And so we are all part of the runoff problem in Santa Barbara. So as we educate people, we can all become part of the solution to water pollution. And so we, in the Creeks Division, run a very robust print, radio, and television advertising campaign for water quality. We do programs with City TV on their Inside Santa Barbara, so we can have more long-form, in-depth analysis of projects and programs. We are a leader in the Regional Creek Week program. We have all of our information on our website at sbcreeks.com. And we also have a clean water business program. And I'll talk about several of those things in a little more depth in a moment. But I did want to highlight that this was something I never thought I would say about the Creeks Division, but City TV and the Creeks Division won a regional Emmy Award for one of our PSAs called The Ocean Begins on Your Street. And that's really a credit to the great work of our City TV team. Next slide, please. The Creeks Division oversees a youth watershed education program. We have a contract with Explore Ecology. One of the main parts of that contract is called the Creek Kids series. With the pandemic, we've been able to transfer that to a virtual program, and it has been able to continue. That series consists of in-class presentations, tours of the Watershed Resource Center, and the program is correlated to state science standards for education. And we have a target, and we have always achieved the target of reaching over 3,000 students a year in the city of Santa Barbara. So over the course of the program, we've reached almost 65,000 school-age students through our watershed education programs and field trips. Next slide, please. We also have a clean water business program. We work with different industries, including automotive services, restaurants and caterers, mobile businesses, and contractors to educate them about best management practices for water quality and water pollution prevention in their industry. We have certified over 300 businesses. What we found early on with that program was that sometimes there were out-of-pocket costs that made it prohibitive for a business to participate in the program. So we developed a business assistance program. This is a small grant program where a business wants to be part of the Clean Water Business Program. They're motivated. They can do all of the best management practices, except for there's some barrier to cost to get themselves into the program. And so we provide grant support, and we provided that to almost 50 businesses in the city. We provided them with water quality improvement equipment in order to become a clean water business. Next slide, please. The city of Santa Barbara participates in Creek Week. We work with Santa Barbara County and the cities of Carpinteria and Goleta and several cities in the north part of the county. Creek Week is a week-long effort in the month of September where we do watershed education programming that is open and free to the community to participate in. In September, we celebrated our 21st annual Creek Week, and you see some examples of the type of programming that we have. We have a excursion with the Land Shark, and we take people around the city and look at various projects and programs Creeks Division has been involved with. And then we get to take a look at it from the ocean as well. And then we have a movie night. The last couple of years, we've been able to have, out before the pandemic, we were able to have movie night down at Hendry's Beach and have an outdoor movie with some watershed or water-based theme. Next slide, please. We also participate in community-based social marketing efforts. We work with other cities and UCSB on these programs. We have one called Close the Poop Loop, trying to get people to pick up their pet waste and not just leave it in a bag on the beach or on the trail or on the curb, but to make sure that it gets into the trash can. And then we're also working with those same agencies on a program called Our Water, Our World, which is which we're doing in conjunction with several of the local hardware and garden supply stores to provide alternatives to chemical fertilizers and pesticide. Next slide, please. Volunteers are an integral part of our programming, both for cleanups as well as plantings. With almost all of our restoration efforts, we've had community planting days. And so it's just been an incredible experience. We have individuals, families, nonprofit organizations, businesses, church groups, scouting groups, all participate. And cumulatively since 2005, we've had over 7,750 hours of volunteer service on Creeks Division related efforts. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the Creeks Division has a website, sbcreeks.com. We have information about our projects and programs. We have technical studies on there, and we also have the ability for people to make a report about water pollution violation that they see, and we will go out and investigate and do enforcement if necessary. We're active on social media with Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We have a monthly email newsletter that goes out to our list, which is approaching 1,000 people who have signed up to receive our monthly newsletter. And then with the pandemic, we developed something called Watershed Wednesdays, which is a Facebook Live video presentation of different watershed activities. So they're education-based, but they also highlight many of our restoration projects and our water quality improvement projects. Next slide, please. I wanted to just highlight some of our capital improvement program funding. As I mentioned earlier, the Creeks Division is funded through the voter-approved Measure B. The Creeks Division does not receive any general fund funding, but we do try to leverage those Measure B dollars, particularly with our capital improvement program, with grant funding that's available. And we are very aggressive at submitting grant proposals to private foundations as well as state and federal grant programs. That those grant efforts really started in 2002. So we're 19 years into it, and look at that. We're just about $19 million in grant funding coming into the city. So we've had a very successful run, and we will continue to look for those opportunities to leverage our Measure B funding and get the most for the people in the city of Santa Barbara. Next slide, please. So we have a we're not doing a print version of our 20-year report. It's all going to be digital, and it is available at sbcreeks.com. We have the report available in English and Spanish on our website. We also have an online responsive design, and what that means is no matter what type of device you're using to view the report, it will conform itself to that device. So you can, so what you see in the picture over there, it's actually a video. You can look at it on your phone and it will adapt to your phone. If you're looking at it on a tablet, it will adapt to the tablet. If you're looking at on your computer, it will adapt to that. So it will respond to whatever device you're using. And we also have it in a PDF format of it as well. Next slide, please. And with that, I will conclude, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks a lot.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Benson. That's quite a report and quite an accomplishment that you guys have been doing since early 2000s. Your department's pretty much a superhero for Santa Barbara, keeping us safe. I'm gonna open it up for questions or comments. I had one question, but I didn't want to take away from your report. My question was just how have Measure B funds been affected by the pandemic, and how will the Creeks Department accommodate those fund fluctuations?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the question. The pandemic was brutal for the hotel and hospitality industry in Santa Barbara, and with regard to revenues for Measure B, we saw approximately 25% drop, a little less than that in going into the past year. And we're very hopeful that we will, that with the vaccine and with things opening back up, that will be moving in a positive direction soon. How do we deal with it? We have a significant reserve that is set aside and guarded every year. The Creeks Advisory Committee oversees that, and they make a recommendation. We aim to keep our reserve at that level, and we've been able to tap into that reserve to keep our program moving forward. We did reduce our capital spending this past year in order to accommodate some of that drop, but we were able to use the reserve to balance the budget as well.
Great. Also, another small question. When was it last time that you guys, I actually saw a steelhead in Santa Barbara County, I won't say where, sometime in the last month. When was the last time you've seen one in our city?
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that you saw that, Madam Chair. We haven't seen them coming up from the ocean for several years now, because we just had an extraordinary drought condition, but we do have some native trout still in the creeks in Santa Barbara, and I don't want to talk about exactly where either, but they are there, and those native trout, some number of those native trout will have that gene that tells them to be anadromous, tells them to swim out to the ocean where they will grow much larger, and then they can come back and reproduce in our local creeks. And even where you have those fish extirpated from a creek, they have been known to come back and recolonize those areas as long as those areas are accessible to them. So even though the numbers are very small of anadromous fish, and this is an endangered species, so the numbers are very small, there is, when you create that opportunity for them to recolonize, you have the opportunity for that population to really grow back and recolonize the creeks.
So wonderful that they have that opportunity because of the work of the Creeks Department. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Anyone else have questions or comments? I see Commissioner Longstreet.
Yes. First off, thank you. Thank you for your guidance of the Creeks Division and Ms. Zachary before you, and all of the dedicated employees that you have. I think this is such an example to us of how you can leverage money, how when you have a dedicated funding source, and you can make things happen. And you have, I also am so glad that this division landed where it did in Parks and Rec, because I think those funds have been protected in the way that the community meant them to be protected. I think the Creeks Advisory Committee has done an excellent job of making sure that happens and that this money is devoted to the area it was meant to be. So it's been a tremendously successful program, and it's due to the leadership and to the wisdom of the voters of this community. So thank you very much.
I can't agree more. We have a wonderful staff. We and have been blessed by that. We have incredible community volunteers as part of the Creeks Advisory Committee. Bibi Longstreet is one of those people. She was a liaison from the Parks and Recreation Commission for many years to the Creeks Committee and is very familiar with our work, and we are very appreciative of her time and commitment to the program. But it really did, as I started in the beginning, it really did start with the voters of the city of Santa Barbara who created this, and the city has been true to that commitment since the voters passed Measure B, and it's led to a very successful program. Thank you for those words, Bibi. Very much appreciated.
It's been a good 20 years.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think, your comments are really, really great. Hard to believe it's been 20 years, but a lot of tremendous achievements over that period of time. And I would reiterate what Mr. Benson said about the staff, the volunteers. Frankly, the opportunity that Measure B Resources has provided to this city is pretty amazing, and the timing couldn't have been better given the tremendous amount of money coming down from the state to support projects and programs to improve water quality, and the ability of the city to be able to say, not only can we do good work with these funds, we can maintain what we did. And that is something that frankly, most communities don't have. And so it's positioned us very well to be competitive, along with all the successes that you can point to as you move forward and seek additional grant funds can point backwards to all the successes, and that gives agencies even more reason to support the work in Santa Barbara. And although I was the first, Cameron's the second, and he's been doing a great job for Cameron, 13?
Yeah, almost 14 years now.
It'll be 14 next summer. So, the voters had a lot of wisdom. The folks that advocated for this, had a lot of wisdom, and great work has been done.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? No, thank you so much, Mr. Benson. Oh, Vice Chair McGill.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I can reiterate everything. I don't want to reiterate everything that's been said, but it's really quite an extraordinary report. And part of me says you want to shout it from the rooftops, and the other part of me says maybe going under the radar is not, for some of this, has not been such a bad thing because that's been help protecting the funding. But what really struck me, particularly in the earlier part of your presentation, is how much can be achieved just by putting the right people on the job and letting the science talk, and letting the data talk, and really honoring that. And I really, as somebody with a technical background, maybe I really appreciate that. And I'd say yes, it's been funding that's been leveraged, but the way that you're working with UCSB is also leveraging intellectual capital, and that's a big achievement, and it's also just, it's great, it just develops potential all across the board. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
With that, I guess we will go to the Ortega Park Revitalization Project. I was wondering if anybody needs a short 3 to 4 minute break before we start this to make sure that we can give it our full attention. I would appreciate it. Would anyone mind? Okay, so let's be back at 5:42. Okay, thank you. Our regular meeting. And I think everybody's back. We could move on to the Ortega Park revitalization project.
Chair Clark and commissioners, 1 second, sorry. It's that time of day. The purpose of the item today is really just to give you an update of where we are, since there's been a lot of discussion about the grant proposal, the community workshops, the murals, not to really get into an in-depth discussion with the commission. We can come back with more information when we have more information, but I did want to make sure the commission is up to speed on where we are with the project. So at the last time the commission engaged in this project is when we asked you to make findings, and those findings were needed in order to move the project toward planning commission and project approval. And the timing of when we did that was related largely due to a deadline to submit a grant application where we were seeking or planned to seek $8.5 million to support construction of this project. And so since then, there's been more discussion about the murals. We prepared a mural evaluation report. Well, we hired a conservator to prepare a mural evaluation report to evaluate all the murals in the park and determine which ones were most significant, so that could be reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission, and we could use that information to integrate those murals into the park design. That effort is still underway. The report, acceptance of the report was continued by the Historic Landmarks Commission. One key element of that report was the recommendations came forward, and it's in the report in terms of which ones are most significant, and the potential way to treat those murals was to really ask the community whether they agreed with those recommendations and whether those were the ones that they wanted treated, and then to try to figure out how we would do that and integrate that into the project design. And to do this work within a fairly tight timeline, because one of the key aspects of the grant application, like any grant application for funds to construct a project, is the grantor wants to know you'll actually move forward and has a timeline to do that. This project is all-encompassing for Ortega Park. We've been working on it for 3 years. We had a tremendous amount of community engagement to get to the master plan that was approved, and we then subsequently moved forward with the preliminary design of the project. And the preliminary design phase of the project is essentially what one does when one's building a house from scratch. You need to basically have an architect design your house, get it through the approval process, and then you sort of get down to sharpening your pencil and really making sure that all the engineering is where it is, figuring out all your interior components. Well, we're at that first phase, and that's where the project approval needs to occur, because subsequently we then spend around another year finalizing that design and getting it ready for building permits and construction. And the grant requires that we get to that preliminary design completion in order for us to be competitive for the funds. And that's essentially what's driven the rapid work effort that's been underway for the last couple of weeks, working with council members and getting council direction that yes, the proposed master plan would proceed. We need to figure out how to integrate murals into that master plan. And yes, go ahead and submit the grant proposal with the idea that we would complete this work within a 90-day timeframe. And the 90 days is set by the state. It's not something that we picked out of thin air. And ideally, we would have completed this process before we submitted the grant proposal, but the work effort was delayed. And unfortunately, some of the greatest delay, as we all know, has been all of us, including the city, including this department, responding to the coronavirus pandemic. However, we didn't really want to lose this opportunity to potentially secure some funds for a really important park project. Funding for parks, unlike funding for creeks, is few and far between and very difficult to secure. A lot of the bond acts that have been passed recently have been around water quality, and land conservation, not around creating vibrant parks in urban areas for kids and families. And we struggle, as you know, securing funding for our park projects, and it can often take up to a decade. So long story short, the Commission's pretty familiar with this project. We've been working on it for a long time. The flurry of activity we're currently engaged in is around taking steps related to the murals that we anticipated we would be doing once we got through project approval. We are doing that now. We had a workshop last week that unfortunately was not successful, and the participation was not what we had anticipated. I think the format was very challenging for the participants, so we definitely understand that. Again, it's one of those struggles with COVID. How do you gather input and begin having that dialogue? And so that was to be the first of 3 workshops that we would undertake to hopefully come to some sort of consensus around the next steps for the murals. So that pretty much sums up the comments that I wanted to share with the Commission. I know we had Commissioner Longstreet and Commissioner McGill at the workshop. There are a number of letters that you've received from individuals that are very focused on what a future pool at Ortega Park would look like. And the master plan calls out for something more along the lines of a community pool with also play features for children, so that not everyone has to be able to swim for ad nauseum in lengths, but could actually play. And there's been a request that we expand the width of that pool by a couple of lanes. And so we've indicated that that's something that can be pursued. But I would also point out that the actual work effort to advance the pool is not part of the grant application, because it's not something that we could guarantee we could build in 2 years. And so the focus of the grant application is the remainder of the park, and that we would focus on the pool as a separate funding opportunity. There's only so much, and the city has not yet committed pool funding. So we would look at that as a second phase. So we do still have time to address that. I do have Rich Hanna, our recreation manager and our aquatics expert, having spent a great deal of his career leading aquatics for the city and our recreation team, to answer questions if the Commission has questions about the pool. And I believe you probably will hear some public comment tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Do we have questions? Does anybody have questions of Ms. Zachary or Mr. Hanna at this time?
Just a clarifying question. So the original design, I think all the letters that I've read or have received are all asking for kind of that regulation sized pool. And if I just want to understand, the original design was more with the intention of just fun swim play versus having like swim competitions.
Chair Fleck and Commissioners, Rich Hanna, Recreation Manager. I can probably walk you through this. First of all, I'd be the first to agree that this community needs a state-of-the-art aquatic complex. I mean, something in the lines that we see in our neighboring communities. I would also wholeheartedly support the fact that the benefits that are associated with swimming are something that this community desperately needs. As we went through the master plan process for the pool, we did have input from residents, youth serving groups, the Santa Barbara School District, the community that resides immediately in that area, and other stakeholders. We'd included Santa Barbara Swim Club, Santa Barbara Water Polo Foundation, and asked that they participate in the process. Ultimately, the pool that's proposed in the master plan today accommodates a multiple of uses, including lap swimming. So what you see at Ortega today is 42 feet, and it's about 3.5 feet in average depth, and it's a perfect swimming pool for teaching swimming lessons. A competition length swimming pool is 25 yards. So when you're looking at the pool, the main predominant pool feature in the Ortega Park master plan, it meets the regulation length for competition or any of those types of activities. As Ms. Zachary explained, it's 2 lanes short. So a competition pool at 25 yards needs to be a minimum of 6 lanes, and it needs to be a minimum depth of 3 feet 9 inches in the shallow end. And we are proposing in the master plan that the pool is 3 feet 3 inches, which would actually encourage more youth and other programs to enjoy the pool for swimming recreation, but it does not preclude people from going and doing fitness swimming or lap swimming. It just cannot hold a competition meet or truly meet the ultimate need for this community, which is a full-born aquatic complex.
Mr. Hanna, I had a question. I feel like I love to swim. I don't have a pool I can go to because when I think of Los Baños, I'm intimidated. I think that's for swimmers, and I'm not a swimmer, you know. And I think what I got from you is you are acknowledging the fact that we do need more competitive swimming pools, and we want to engage the kids and youth in that super healthy activity, but we don't have a place for people like small children or middle-aged women like me who aren't swimmers to go. I mean, there is no other community pool I'm overlooking except for ones that you have to pay a lot of money to go to, like Lita Valley and Santa Barbara Athletic Club, correct?
Chair Clark and commissioners, you're correct. So just to help the commission understand what a true competition pool is, what's included in a typical master plan for just a standalone aquatic complex, which was identified in our 2003 feasibility study. It's 50 meters by 25 yards. And so the only pool that meets that regulation in Santa Barbara currently is at Dos Pueblos High School. A lot of the community pool or the public or the private pools that you reference that are at health clubs or even some of our school pools are all 25 yards and do host CIF competition. They're varying depths, and they usually are at temperatures that really are designed to encourage swimming at a competitive level. If we had a 50 by 25 pool, it does provide the flexibility for people to swim 25 yards, which is what we're proposing at Ortega, or be used for 50-meter training at various times of the swimming season. It would also be able to host and accommodate water polo and diving if we wanted to pursue adding a depth to the pool that would allow for diving. So a full-born 50 by 25 pool meets all of the needs that you're hearing for in this community. The challenge is you also need another complementary pool to help kids learn how to swim and bridge that gap and provide opportunities for this community to have access to aquatics that they may not have currently at Los Baños. You need to have a pool that is supportive in temperature so that kids, I've taught many kids to swim at Ortega, probably over 1,000 kids. And I can tell you, even at 3.5 feet of depth, kids are very intimidated to get into that pool. Not every kid is doing something with the instructor at the time, so they're waiting on the wall. So there's features that you want to have in a pool that bring on and teach kids how to learn how to be safe, whether they go on to be a competitive swimmer, a lap swimmer, somebody that enjoys recreation, somebody that might like aqua aerobics. And currently we don't have that pool here in Santa Barbara. And it's not it's Ortega or nothing. I think what Ortega could do, and if there was a decision to expand to 6 lanes, you would have that swimming ability that's being requested by the public. You could have competitions at that location, and you'd be able to teach swimming lessons in in that pool very successfully. I think the bigger conversation is someplace like Los Baños being developed as part of our capital program to be that 50 by 25 meter pool really is what the community needs. And it's set up to serve the community in such a way that it already has, it's 50 meters, it's not 25 yards wide. It has ample parking immediately around it. It's immediately on bus routes. There's facilities that are part of the pool itself that can provide, you know, the showers and the restrooms. We already have all the mechanical systems in place. So the question really is does that major aquatic complex belong at Ortega Park? I would say if you were to build it there, you're probably going to eliminate a lot of the recreational features that are proposed as part of the master plan. And you'd have to account for parking somewhere up to the tune of 200 to 300 parking spaces, and it would become much of a regional attraction for other activities, something that we heard through the master plan process was not desired. So as I reference all that, Ortega has the potential to still host competitions, meet that community need that we heard through the stakeholder process, introduce families to aquatic play and swimming lessons, and we invest the time in Los Baños to turn it into a full-born competition pool that meets the need in the community.
Answers my question, thank you.
And Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think the other thing to remember is our capital program, which you get to see every 2 years for the last 20 years, probably longer, but 20 years, has called for renovating the Los Baños facility to provide the type of pool facility that we know would meet a lot of the needs that Rich Hanna mentioned. That's a monumental undertaking, but we have the space there to do it, and that's what is historic. Well, now is used for that. Versus a neighborhood park, one of the key issues that came up with all the neighbors is compatibility of the park with their neighborhood access and parking. And ideally, there'd be more land in Santa Barbara today than there is, and we would be able to repurpose some of the land that we can't repurpose right now. But Parks and Recreation is limited in its options for the land it has available.
Thank you. Vice Chair McGill, was that a finger?
It's a pen, actually, but it'll work.
You want to say something?
I might be being a little bit dense here, probably am, but can you help me understand this whole 90-day thing a little bit better? What I think everybody probably needs to understand this a little bit better, because you know my background conversation as I'm fearing we're spinning out of control and this whole thing's about to come off the rails. And that would be a real tragedy for the community that has worked so hard and is so excited about this. Help me understand. I understand the whole idea about you don't want to redesign the house just when you're bringing in the contractors. I get that totally. But help me understand how the grant application works versus the 90-day clock works. What needs to be set in concrete now? What do we have time to work on? How do we push the approval process and make sure that we successfully get this through? And how much flexibility we have. That's sort of a big open-ended bucket of questions, but I think there's been so much noise in the last few weeks that maybe the end goal is starting to get a little bit lost, and certainly the details of the process for me are starting to get lost. Thank you.
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, it's a difficult thing to explain to most people that aren't involved in land development and the rules and regulations around developing land. And when we say 90 days, it's a grant requirement that we've completed and we've certified that the project complies with the California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay.
And so that is where, when we finish our preliminary design of a project, We get design approval from either the Architectural Board of Review or Historic Landmarks Commission. We have compatibility findings from this commission. And then ultimately the Planning Commission approves the project and certifies that we've complied with the California Environmental Quality Act. And the California Environmental Quality Act requires that we evaluate the environmental effects of the project. So it have to do with air quality, soils, traffic, noise, biology, all of the things that have to be evaluated to comply. And so that is a key milestone in determining whether a project's feasible. And it occurs with project approval. So what any grantor would want to know, it's kind of this, it's that you've got money in the bank to build the house before they give you the loan for the house. Before they give you a loan, you have a certain amount of money before a bank might loan you more money to get your project done. The state wants to make sure you've done all your due diligence and you have a project you can move forward with before they give you money, because they don't want that money just to sit there unused while you still figure out what you're doing.
So from a just where we are today, when are our 90 days up?
Early June.
So we have until early June, which is basically 2 months, to get through Historic Land Commission, Architecture Review Board, planning, and have a CEQA analysis complete.
No, we need to come to consensus about the murals and then go to the Planning Commission. That's what we need to do. And that includes returning to the Historic Landmarks Commission.
Okay. Now, things like pools and things like that, is that something that can be put aside and just the murals processed? Because there seems to be an intent to try to piggyback that right now.
That's correct. The location for the aquatic facility is part of the preliminary design. The absolute details about how big the pool is can be discussed further afterward. That has not been finalized.
Okay, but so the 4 versus, excuse me for asking what like sort of very basic questions, but the 4 versus 6 lanes can be done later.
That's correct.
Move the whole pool and make it 50 yards. We need to put that, that can't be done later. That's got to be parked.
Well, ultimately, either we move forward with the project as proposed or we start all over. And I think
what I mean by
the challenge is that there's been significant amount of community engagement, and that would essentially deem that work effort not relevant. And then also the fact that, we have other park advocates that also want their skate park and they want their soccer field. And the idea and the whole approach is how do we balance these competing needs and desires in 5.5 acres in the middle of a downtown East Side neighborhood that are, so really it's really trying to do the most we can for as many people as we can to provide the recreation opportunities that don't exist in the park today. I think some of the other considerations that we really have is we've been talking about doing something with this pool, oh gosh, maybe since 2003, but certainly it's come up over and over again in the last 10 years because it's slowly not, we're running out of time. It was built in 1950. And there are rules and regulations regarding the operation of pools that have changed dramatically since 1950. So the city lost its saltwater wading pool at East Beach in the late 70s. We removed the wading pool at Ortega Park 20 years ago, I believe it was, because you weren't allowed to have the same filtration serve a wading pool as well as a small swimming pool. So every time the regulations change, like air quality regulations, like water quality regulations. You have to treat your water differently. You have to treat a combustion engine differently because you want to reduce the pollution. The same thing goes with pools. As health codes change, as building codes change, we lose the ability to use the asset that we have. And we are one step away of losing this asset altogether. So in wanting to advance this project, it's really keeping in mind that all of the infrastructure at Ortega Park is really old. The last time the city really invested, 1975.
Right.
And so when we get to 2025, it will be 50 years. And the idea is then we actually have a vital new park that will serve the community for many, many years and do so in a more modern way. Not what we thought was great in 1975.
Yeah. And my concern is that we have until June to make that happen, and it's kind of, things are blowing up when they need to be getting stitched up.
So Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, commissioners, if it doesn't happen and we don't get the grant, then we just keep working until we come to a solution. But there won't be any funds to build the project.
Which would be quite a disappointment for the very many hundreds of families that were so excited as we went through those workshops. But
I would add that irrespective of what happens, the department's committed to revitalizing this park, and we'll take whatever steps we need to take to move forward, depending on whatever the outcome is. It's one of 60 locations that we have, so it'll be part of that longer process again. It's just a matter of, we've done a tremendous amount of work to come up with a proposal that has been largely embraced. We clearly needed to do more work on the murals earlier than we are now, and we're committed to doing that work now, and hopefully we'll be in a good position to have the project funded in the future.
Couple of questions, please. During the public outreach meetings, the murals were they were covered, I thought, in some detail, and decisions were brought forth. We're getting new people coming to the table. How were they missed is my first question. I'm going to now ask about the pool. How heavily tapped is Los Baños? And is it inadequate to serve our community, our city's aquatic community?
Yes.
I'm not sure how Ms. Zachary wants to proceed. I could probably start on both of those questions. The department did a very extensive outreach on the master plan process, mailers, newspaper ads, public meetings, radio announcements, and really built up a strong working group that moved through that process. And at various times during the master planning process, the discussion around public art and art in the park was brought up, and it was a consideration for the overall master plan project, but did not specifically really get defined until the end of the stakeholder process, when we had a meeting at Ortega Park just specifically to talk about murals. And at that point, the department, and as part of this process, we realized that the murals were going to be an integral part of the master plan project moving forward, as well as other art opportunities in the park. And we felt that we had the time to go ahead and work those things through. And specifically to answer your question about Los Baños, and I did air, for those of people that are listening at home, there are 3 50 by 25 meter pools in Santa Barbara. One is at DP, the other 2 are on the UCSB campus. I referenced the Dos Pueblos pool specifically because it does have a partnership with the community and the school to provide access, as does the recreation center. Los Baños is maxed out. Right now, during COVID, for example, we're open from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., 7 days a week, essentially. We are actually using Santa Barbara Swim Club equipment to put in 25-yard lanes in the pool to increase the capacity from 1 person per lane. We would have only been able to accommodate 7 swimmers. We can now accommodate up to 15 swimmers at any one time. So that shows you the benefit of having a pool that's 50 by 25. But outside of COVID, the public has access to the pool 3 times a day. There's a morning lap swim, there's a middle of the day lap swim, and there's an afternoon lap swim. The rest of the times during the day, the pool is utilized either by Santa Barbara City College or Santa Barbara Swim Club or Santa Barbara Masters Swimming, which contribute a significant amount of the funding to offset the overall operations of the pool. The challenge with swimming, and for those of you that have done this in the past, is if there's 2 swimmers in the pool or 50 swimmers in the pool at a lap swim, it costs you the same amount to operate because you've got to put the same staff, same chemicals, same public access, and those types of things. So over time, we've been strategic to have lap swimming times that are available to the public at times when we can maximize capacity to offset those charges. If we were to expand lap swimming and make it more available, it would come at the expense of Santa Barbara Swim Club or Santa Barbara City College, and we would not be generating the same revenue. And at last check, Los Baños generates about 50% of the general fund commitment. So in answer to your question, the Los Baños pool is extremely maxed out year round. And then in the summertime, we augment the schedule to put in youth swimming lessons and recreation swim for the community that they don't have at any other time of the year other than our swim lesson program at Los Baños.
So Ortega is an ideal opportunity. What would be the impact then on the community swim if we have water polo teams waiting to occupy the facility?
Commissioner Perry and commissioners, that's a good question. Right now, and it's interesting, the water polo community did not participate heavily in the stakeholder process. We did have participation from the swim club. Currently, Santa Barbara Water Polo Foundation, so 805, and I think it's Premier Water Polo, the 2 water polo clubs in the community, occupy every single high school swimming pool when the high schools are not using them. So they use Santa Barbara High School, San Marcos, and DP. And then the Premier Water Club is affiliated with UCSB, so they get to use those facilities out there. Water polo continues to expand, so there would be a need to have more water space, obviously, and potentially in a managed facility, potentially at a cheaper rate than what they're paying the school district. If we were to have increased interest from clubs and whether water polo or swimming, all of those programs occur after the school day is over, which is also the time when parents want to bring their kids for swimming lessons. And so you can end up in a conflict of, are we going to prioritize this for community and lap swimming and fitness and have novice, like youth swim team competitions in this location? Or are we going to prioritize that it's competition and we're going to rent this pool out to a third-party provider? I think the 6-lane, 25-yard pool at Ortega, if that's the direction that gets finalized as we move through that process, can accommodate all of those things, but most likely not water polo or diving.
Thank you. If no one has any further comments or questions at this time, I would like to invite members of the public here to speak about Ortega Park to speak now.
Chair Clark, we have a couple of hands raised. The first one was Mary Turley. Ms. Turley, I'm going to unmute you now. You will have 2 minutes to speak. You need to unmute yourself. There's a little microphone. There you go.
Okay. I just thank Rich Hanna and the commissioners for the questions they've asked, and Rich on the background. I had something a little bit more comprehensive to present, but I'll keep it shorter now that some of that's gone over. My name is, again, Mary Turley. I'm a longtime Santa Barbara resident, and I'm calling in regards to support of rebuilding a regulation-sized pool at Ortega Park. And locally, I've swum at Los Baños since the early 80s. I'm a surfer and swimmer and use our local pools to stay in shape. My daughter also took swim lessons at Ortega Pool, and I have financially supported the adult swim lessons via the Friends of Los Baños group and the city of Santa Barbara. As a fitness swimmer, I appreciate each and every pool that we have in the community. And Santa Barbara desperately needs more and larger pools and more updated facilities. The lack of adequate aquatic facilities was pointed out in the capital improvement program outlined from March 2019 and the aquatic complex feasibility study from 2003. If we are ever to have an upgrade of Los Baños, we'll need all the pools available to continue the current community aquatics program. Ortega Park would be a fabulous centralized location for a multi-purpose regulation-sized community pool, which could be used by a wide variety of community members for child, adult swim lessons, adult and youth adult fitness, lap swimming, open swim times, and a community-based competitive swim team. I'm just requesting that at the appropriate time that the Parks and Recreation Commission and staff undertake much wider community outreach as well as outreach to the aquatic community to come up with an aquatic facilities design to meet the current and future needs of our residents. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Truly.
Chair Clark, now we have a Victoria Valente. Ms. Valente, I'm unmuting you. Let me go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm concerned about the proposed Ortega Park aquatics facilities. First, the aquatics community would like to request a meeting as soon as possible. We would like a community outreach meeting. We've never had one. Third, is the preliminary design a final design? We need to know that because I don't think it is. Number 4, I've heard that the pool is built first in a park construction project. I'd like that confirmed. In this project's inception, it was decided that a non-competition pool would be offered, stated as such in surveys and workshops, not a pool, but a non-competition pool. I placed a public records request to get more information. The amenities description states that its design was to ensure that the pool not be monopolized by competitive aquatics programs. Why not control the pool schedule instead? So the city had decided this before asking the community. This shortchanges the east side, and many residents are not even aware of this because they've never had the opportunity to be exposed to aquatic sports. The lap pool, as designed, is an accessory, not a main feature of modern aquatics facilities. It could host swim lessons, classes, and open swim, which are all necessary, but not enough. East Side youth would have no opportunity to take their skill to a higher level with the instruction of a swim coach to develop skills sufficient to compete in aquatics or junior lifeguards, which is not a very diverse crowd. How would we draw more diversity to aquatics? Visibility and accessibility. First, potential participants have to get interested. How about not hiding the pool and all the activities that take place behind buildings and a stucco wall? And have competitive aquatics programs visible to other users. The new facilities could be built at the site of the current pool where there is more space for a regulation pool with accessory pools and aquatic features. In the process, the murals would be saved. These resources need to be accessible to neighborhood youth. With visible, accessible, and standard-sized facilities within walking and biking distance, the neighborhood would gain interest in these sports and the facilities would come to life. Parking for special events can also be made available at Santa Barbara Junior High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valente.
Chair Clark, we have another speaker, hand raised, Mary Robles. If I'm unmuting you, if you can unmute yourself. So hold on one second. There we go. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking this time to speak about something that is very important. You already know why we think a regulation pool would be wonderful here, but I want to take it as part of an enhancement to the East Side community. I think the children deserve that live in the area. I think competition swimming would bring pride and character and something that is needed in our area. And I also think that a pool, maybe with the draw that it would have, would also make a stronger business model in the Milpas area, in the whole East Side area, and make it a prominent, prideful place for the community to come and to see that we have a beautiful city all over, not just one area, but our area is as good as anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Navarez, do we have additional speakers?
Chair Clark, no, there are no further hands raised.
Okay. I think Mrs. Valente had a couple of questions that were answered. She had asked if the preliminary design was final. I believe that that was a no. I can't remember her other questions now. I didn't write them down.
Chair Clark, commissioners, the use of the term preliminary design is one that tells you the extent to which you've actually completed your engineering and done pretty substantial work to change the design of the park as it's currently proposed would put us back into a new preliminary design phase.
Thank you.
However, during design development, which is finishes, and in the case of the pool area, there's more detail that needs to be done that wasn't required under preliminary design. So we have that flexibility.
Thank you. Commissioner Longstreet.
25 years ago, I started on Parks and Recreation. My first meeting was about the rehab of Los Baños pool. It was a meeting that had an entire room filled with swimmers who at, such as this, the last moment, decided it needed to be a totally different pool. It had gone through a process. So I feel like I'm having a little bit of deja vu here, but one issue I have right now is that we're on a timeline for a grant, $8.5 million. There's another $1 million grant out there also. We've gone through a design process. We've worked with user groups. We've reached out to the community. And it has been a long, and it has been an open process. This is a park that is serving the needs of an entire community. We have a pool that's approaching 50 years old that will not be available. We have no other pool in the community that can be heated to the temperature to teach children to swim. There's a big difference between lap swimmers, competitive swimmers, and the temperature you keep a pool at to teach young children. So we're getting so far off track for the building of this park that it is stunning to me. The pool is on hold, the design, we've been told that. So I need to say, let's put that to bed till we get through the fact that we're even gonna have an Ortega Park rebuilding. We have to deal with the murals. I sat through the murals meeting before staff even had the introductions. The comments were on the screen that were not constructive at all, and in fact abusive at times. So how do we get past this? How do we move this to the project it needs to be? We heard from the neighbors, you know, we need some compatibility. People live across the street from it. This project came out of the needs they have, the whole community has, for safety in the park. So I am hoping that what we can do is stay on track as a community to move forward to revitalize the park so that we can get to a place to discuss a pool. It's not funded, but the whole park might not be funded if we don't make some progress on this. I am hoping that the future meetings, and I'd like maybe Ms. Zachary to outline that process for us, how we get to the end game on these murals. What I see are some historic and meaningful murals created by the community that are on structures and surfaces that are not lasting. There's some that are in terrible shape. There's some that are okay. Ricardo Venegas did a great history of the murals. I'd encourage any of our commissioners to look at the video and hear his presentation. We had Danny Mesa, who was the creator of some of those murals, and at HLC, Manuel and Sueta saying, we can recreate. I'd like to see us get to the point where we have something for the community to recreate, for the artists to come back, for the young people to get involved and to bring it, to not only learn from the murals of the past and recreating them, but to then bring forward their murals, like as Danny Mesa did on Haley Street, on the market. There's so much potential here, and it's frustrating me that we're arguing about it. Part of this I know is Zoom, and that people attack in a way they wouldn't face to face. But what I saw at that meeting and listened to was, it just wasn't productive, and it wasn't the best of our community. So I want to call out people to come forward with some creative ideas to get us to the next end goal of the murals, resolution there, moving forward with a park that serves seniors and families with bocce ball, basketball, a skate park, some water play for kids that we can have maybe who don't swim, the soccer field and baseball and the multi-use field. This is a big project to be losing it over the disagreement at this time in the process. So I don't want to discount 3 years of community meetings and input now. So maybe Ms. Zachary can outline what comes forward with the murals from here.
Chair Clark, Commissioners, Commissioner Longstreet, we're still working on the details. We had hoped to do a meeting, community meeting on site this Saturday. Again, COVID makes it really difficult, technically not allowed to congregate, and coming up with a strategy to have people safely participate in an event on site is something that we take very seriously. We've been very careful with how we allow people to recreate and use our facilities in our parks. The same goes for neighbors coming together and talking about the park. We are talking with some others regarding how and when, and the importance of door-to-door outreach. That's an undertaking in and of itself, particularly if it's to really capture the entire East Side neighborhood, which extends all the way to Salinas and down almost to the freeway versus just the most immediate neighborhood. So that's our goal. And I think a couple of the steps that we've taken thus far is to try to use a very challenging time and an imperfect method, and then to invite folks that could participate in that method, knowing full well that being on site is a far better option. We had our workshops next door because it was right there, and so you could go out and walk the park, and we had another couple of meetings in the park itself. Right now, COVID makes it really challenging. We're coming out of it, but at the same time, we need to be mindful of people's safety and that consideration.
Definitely.
Hoping that in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a better sense. In the next week, if we can try to do something the weekend after Easter. That's the other challenge, is Easter is coming up, and so we can't really do anything at that time, ask people to come out. I don't have a clear answer for you, unfortunately. And then hopefully get more input from the mural artists themselves. I mean, that's what we've done since 1979. In fact, there's been many murals that have gone away. We had to demolish the old restroom and build a new restroom. And so the murals on the restroom today are new murals. We had an area around the stage that we had to eliminate because of the unsafe activities that occur in the park. And I think that's something that's also lost right now is the lack of safety and the violence and other activities that occur at that park because nobody's there, or the only people who are there may be engaged in activities that are not positive. That's driving this project too. And that's the importance of it to the community.
That was the beginning of this project.
It was.
To me. But now my other question is, what is our park zoning for Ortega Park?
It's a community park sports facility, so we can have, for example, what the commission approved in terms of findings, in terms of the type of amenities that are there, that are allowed there. We're essentially replacing the amenities that are allowed there.
And I guess the other thing I want to bring up is this park renovation includes new parking. It includes sidewalks and access. It is not an accessible park now. Okay. So we're losing a lot if we lose this revitalization.
Ms. Zachary, may I? Do we have the flexibility to put final designs on hold and still apply for these grants? Or do we have to have some idea of what we're going to have as a finished product? Can the murals be refined later? Can the size of the pool be refined later without derailing the grant?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, that's what we've been working toward. So the layout of the park in terms of where the amenities are located are part of preliminary design. The options to include murals in the areas of the new park are up for discussion and always have been up for discussion. The area designated for the pool is essentially pretty much what we expect. What actually goes within that pool complex is where we have opportunity.
Then we're in a position to move forward with the grant applications.
Sorry, what was that, Commissioner Perry?
Then we are in a position to move forward with the grant applications and not risk losing them while we refine the final product with community.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, we're getting into a level of detail that's really difficult to just have a conversation without actually showing it to you. So we're happy to bring this back to the commission. The grant application's been submitted. You'll see in your staff report that we went to council to get their authority to submit the grant application. It had a deadline. So if you'd like us to come back at a further date, then we certainly will do. In fact, we certainly will come back when we have the outcome of the community workshops and would look forward to having commission participate in those. And as soon as we have more information, you will be some of the first to know.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Vice Chair McGill, you had your pen up.
Yeah, just one last couple of comments. The grant, yeah. From what I understand of the grant application, you can put a grant application in, but there is a certain level of, well, the grantor needs to believe that the thing's going to get built. And I think that's really probably what is concerning us at this point. But I went to Ortega Park yesterday just to take another look at the murals and have a little mooch around. Yesterday was a gorgeous, gorgeous spring day in the middle of spring break. I was there at 11 o'clock in the morning. There was not a child in the park. There was not a family in the park. There was a totally empty playground. There were 4 people in the park. They were all individual adult males. This is what we're trying to fix and what we're trying to do for the East Side neighborhood. I was dismayed is a word I used in a letter to council. Shocked is the right word at the tone of the meeting on the mural workshop. Director Zachary was barely into the hi, how are yous, and very antagonistic Zoom chat comments came through, and they never stopped. There was no intent to listen. There was no intent to engage. And yeah, Zoom's not perfect. None of these meeting formats are perfect, but that really doesn't excuse what I saw last week. And quite frankly, the staff of Parks and Rec have worked really, really hard to engage the community, and they didn't deserve what happened to them, and the people who've contributed so much to this park designs didn't deserve what happened, or don't deserve what happened. But interestingly, cutting through all of that, there was some really, there's so much potential to not have this be happening this way. The history of the murals themselves is one of change. It's a creative space for people to come in and create. I think Ricardo said there's only one mural that hasn't been changed in all this time. Danny Mesa said, God, one of the ones that I've done is falling apart. Give me another one to do. There's such an opportunity here to do what the murals intended, and it seems to be getting lost in the shouting, and I'm finding that incredibly disappointing. I will be happy to engage in any further workshops. Not sure how that happens in Zoom, because I know that it seems to be hard to manage. I don't know if there's another format that would work better. But yeah, I just I need to express disappointment and full support for the engagement work that the department has been doing. I really, really hope we can keep this on track.
Thank you. Yeah, the road we've gone down the last couple of weeks with Ortega Park it's really just depressing to me. We're at a time we should be celebrating each other and our achievements, and actually celebrating that we've survived this pandemic, that the Parks Department has continued to work to give us opportunities to be healthy and recreate outside. So it's really obvious to me that the aquatic community really cares about their sport. It's their passion. They believe it in, they want to advocate for them. So, they want to advocate. So all the more power to them. And the Parks Department obviously really cares about the entire community on the east side in Santa Barbara, including the aquatics community. And I have faith that each community will be able to reach out and talk constructively going forwards about this. I'd like to encourage the Parks Department to double check its mailing list and make sure that all the heads of the swim clubs have the subsequent community meetings in their inboxes when the emails get sent out notifying about the outreach. And I echo what Commissioner Longstreet and Vice Chair McGill say. We can't lose the opportunity to refurbish this park. We can't have an empty park with needles in the grass, as we know there has been, because we're squabbling over the murals and the pool size. We will come to an agreement if we all recognize that we care about this community. We don't need to have nastiness right now. I agree with you, Vice Chair McGill. And I have faith that the Parks Department will continue its outreach and continue to have conversations with stakeholders. They've done a great job so far, and I'm really sorry that some members of the aquatic community feel like they weren't outreached to. But it's a two-way street. You can look on the city website and see when these meetings are. It takes two. I don't have much else to say. I think Commissioner Longstreet and Commissioner McGill were really succinct about their feelings, and I hope that we get the chance to move forward on this park, and that all communities feel like they're invested and they get what they need. So, and perhaps Mr. Hanna, you could answer maybe before we close, the two questions I missed for Ms. Valente was she was wondering at some point if she could have a meeting with the city and represent the aquatics community. And her other question was whether the pool needed to be built first.
Chair Clark and commissioners, we've already indicated to Ms. Valente that we'd be picking up this conversation this summer.
Great.
It's not something that we need to have right now. And the order of construction can vary based on any number of issues and what we plan to do. And so we know that probably the hardest part of the park to fund is going to be the pool. And the most important part of the park that came from all of the youth that participated is the soccer field and the skate park. And so, and then the family picnic area and the playground. I mean, all of those things that will absolutely serve the community immediately. I would say that, you know, some of the discussion, you know, we do have to build a new restroom. What we currently have there, even if we developed around it, isn't big enough and wouldn't meet code. We've mentioned that related to the pool. It's like once you get to a point where something reaches at the end of its life and then the codes change, it wouldn't function as a restroom, and then we'd have to build another restroom, and then where would we put that? And so again, I think some of the challenges we face is we only have 5.5 acres. We're not Ventura, that I think built their pool complex on 20 acres that was farmland. Well, the farmland in Santa Barbara has been long gone. And so, you know, it's trying to take a already built environment and revitalize it. And those are the challenges people are finding all over this city as they look to ways to increase density, to provide the housing for the people that we're required to provide housing for people we're required to do it under the state. So that's what I have to say. And I'd be happy, again, as I said, I think given the extent of this conversation, we can come back at another time and continue to discuss with the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Zachary. Right. I'd like to end on a positive note. I am still excited about Ortega Park. I still think it's going to be a wonderful revitalization project with beautiful murals and a pool that the community can enjoy. And with that, I'll adjourn.